interesting, the main parties seem to have pushed the roles of the leaders' wives even harder this campaign. Christine, as a veteran of that, how do you feel about it?
Veteran, thanks. Well, they're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't, the poor wives. They have to be trotted out. They might not like it. And the three main leaders' wives this time, they are all amazing women in their own right. They could all be out there doing, are out there doing their own thing outside the campaign. But I think they have to be there. They humanise the otherwise possibly robotic politicians, and I think a lot of politicians need humanising, and the wives do that. They sort of offer the more intimate, you know, they give them some femininity which they surely need. And but it must be a nightmare. You know, how much did the top cost, and where do the shoes come from? It is ridiculous to have.
What's the state of your toenails?
Oh well, I know she'll never live that down, will she? I know.
Well, we were talking about, you know, three fairly high-flying women in their own right, very high-flying indeed. And yet, as you say, you know, we're talking about what they wear or the state of their toenails. Karen, is that right?
But, sorry, yeah. I don't think, is it? I don't know if you look at Nicola Sturgeon's husband, we don't focus on what suit he wears. We're not fussed about his shoes. Should we be bothered? I think we do live in a world now where almost, I mean, if I seen Justine, I'd be like, oh, I like that dress. I wonder where she's got it from. So, in some ways, it's almost... just wanted to know where they got the dress from. I'm not interested in whether it costs £1,000, £100 or £10. But if it's a nice dress, then we all go out and buy it. So yeah, I don't know. I'm fairly relaxed about it.
I think it's important for example, if you're Samantha Cameron, I think it's quite important to try and get the image across. You didn't buy your dress from goodness knows where. You actually did get it from M&S.
I mean, Sonia, we hadn't had that many bachelor Prime Ministers. We had, of course, Ted Heath, and Mrs Thatcher had a husband. So are spouses an asset, liability, just a fact of life?
Oh, I mean, I think they can be an asset. I mean, I think they could be much more of an asset. I mean, Clementine, for instance, was much more of a politician supporting Winston Churchill than the current crop are, even though she was doing her job 70 years ago. She was much more involved in government, much more the public face of his government. She dealt with people's problems. She got involved in sort of the running of things, albeit obviously during the Second World War when circumstances were exceptional.
And Dennis Thatcher also is, you know, folk memory is that he was a steadying influence on his wife.
I think he was definitely a steadying influence, but I don't think he was nearly as involved as she was. In a way, I'd like to see politicians' wives, particularly leaders' wives, be a little bit more ambitious. I don't want to hear about their toenails or kitchens particularly. I'm like, what do they think, these women?
Presumably they have a leaders' wives debate.
But that's not their fault, is it, that the media focus on their toenails? I mean, when you two are on the screen together, do they really care what tie Adam is wearing?
They do, actually.
No, they do. Not as much as what dress you're wearing, I bet. They don't want the focus on it, do they? But if they're pushed out in the spotlight, they've got to look good. They've got to do their best.
I think the thing to remember as well, though, is that they're not necessarily a public figure either. So they are three successful women in their own right, very successful women. So they're just taking on this role of, this is my husband, I'm supporting my husband. And credit to them for doing that. And I think, you know, we do forget that the wife of leaders, it must be one of the most hardest, difficult jobs to actually do. So I respect all three women, and I personally think they are three amazing women in their own right.
But you were right. Does anybody know anything about Mr Sturgeon or Mr Leanne Wood or Mr Green Party lady? We don't. And people,
no, they're not. All of them. I've seen in defence of journalists, I've seen profiles of all those figures, but there certainly isn't a concentration on what they look like, which is probably just as well. But looking at the specific choices we have before us, Nick Clegg's wife and the others, who do you think is doing their husband the most credit?
Do you know, I think probably Miriam is Nick Clegg's wife. I think she goes out there, we see a bit of her intelligence, we see a little bit of her thinking. She went, oh my goodness, she escaped the political minders for an evening the other day.
And she disagrees with her husband, you know, she believes in God, she says, I'm not going to do this, I'm going to carry on working.
Doesn't that make it all more real? It makes it more real to me. I mean, I think she's actually done him a lot of good, and I think we'd all like to see a bit more from her.
Because I interviewed her in the 2010 election campaign when she wasn't following her husband around, and I said, why aren't you doing that? And she said, come on, I've got my own job, I've got my own role, I've got my kids.
She's still not following her husband around.
Well, she's not, but she's doing it more than she did then. I think people had a respect for that.
She's an amazing role model, I think. You say she doesn't necessarily agree with her husband. Well, I think you're the historian. Clement Attlee's wife voted Conservative all her life.
Well, I mean, Clementine Churchill was a Liberal and remained a Liberal.
Well, don't forget the Tories had to put out an official statement saying it was a foul slur to suggest that Sam Cam might have voted for Tony Blair.
Oh, yes, I've forgotten that. I'm sure it was a slur.
But it's interesting talking about Clementine's role there. I mean, in this day of social media, Karen, can politicians' wives afford to take that kind of role nowadays? I mean, surely they'd be shot down in flames if they were trying to influence the way that politics runs.
What, take the role of being the MP's wife, or take the role of being...
Or being the real power of
I think so, and I
think,
certainly for me, I have my role, so when I'm on duty and I'm the MP's wife, you know, I take the job very, very seriously. Yeah. You know, we go to various events, serious events, you know, ceremonies of all descriptions, but then we go to fun events where people want me to get glammed up and want me to have high heels on and a nice dress because they like that. So
I mean, there's a slight sense with you two that you are sort of Miriam Gonzalez, is that both of you wear the trousers as well.
we wear a leg each, but I decide which pair we put on in the morning. But I think the important thing is that the spouses are not thought necessarily to be driving the political agenda. But of course, I mean, pillow talk is about the most sort of lethal weapon that any spouse has got, whether it's Dennis Thatcher or Miriam Gonzalez. Of course they influence their spouses.
And I think the three leaders tend to play to their strengths. So if I look at, you know, Justine at the moment, and it's such a shame that Justine hasn't come out sooner, because you've seen her today on screen. She's amazing, and she's got that empathetic approach, and I can see that she's a mum of 2 boys. She's got boys just a little younger than mine, and you naturally, for me, I have that connection with her. So I wish that Justine came out sooner, really, and I like that kind of approach, and I like Miriam's approach, that she's tough and you won't tell me kind of what to do, and I like Sam's approach, that she does always seem to support David. So it's 3 incredible women with different...
Yeah, if you're fed up with the politicians, vote for their wives. Anyway, thank you all very much indeed.
Absolutely.